See, recording here. And we are ready to go. Welcome, everybody, to a Free Thinkers Corner, Books and More, our Meet the Author event featuring our guest tonight is Tim Baird from Massachusetts. He's the author of um, three books, well, actually four books, but three of them are the series Dragon and the Whites. The first one's Dragon and the Whites, then Washington's Dragon, and his latest book, Dragon Liberator. And we'll talk about his fourth book later, or when he decides that he'd like to do that. He's an automation in his normal life. He's a automation engineer, and he spends his days working in the world of mechanical engineering through product development and industrial automation systems. He volunteers with children in several youth robotic programs, and he's trying his hardest to avoid growing up one robot at a time. And without further ado, we have welcome Tim.
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's always a good time hanging out with you in your store.
Yep.
Yeah. So as Chris said, my name is Tim Baird. I'm from Central Mass, just 45 minutes west of Boston. I'm a mechanical engineer by day, mainly working in the automation sector within kind of the med device world. And when I want to escape the realities of today, I love reading and writing everything fantasy and sci-fi related. You can see over here next to me just a small clip of my library that I have. There's another bookshelf or two that you can't see. And yeah, I started writing probably 5 or 6 years ago and published my first book, The Dragon and the Whites, back in 2017. And then that was followed up by a sequel, Washington's Dragon Hunter, and the latest book from this series, Dragon Liberator. So it's technically a 3-book series, but I am working on a collection of short stories and novellas that are going to accompany it, which will be out most likely sometime next year based on my current writing schedule. I took some time off during the pandemic to write a pandemic-themed sci-fi novella, Eggs in Two Baskets, and this actually just came out a little while ago. And all 4 of these books are available at a Free Thinkers Corner. So, if you want to read any of these, I highly recommend you talk to Chris and the team and pick up these books. They are just nice paperbacks. You can get them in hardcovers too. If you want to talk to Chris, he can source them appropriately. And, obviously I can customize any kind of signatures or messages that you want in the books. Free Thinkers Corner has always been a great place for indie authors like me, and they're very supportive. So, thank you for checking them out and hearing in on what I have to do. So if you haven't read any of my books, I'll give you sort of the reverse of how I just did it. Eggs in Two Baskets is just a quick, short, fun read. I don't know if I'd really say fun because it is kind of an apocalyptic story, but it takes place in a very similar environment that we find ourselves now. And it's 30 years in the future, and it details a situation that we find ourselves in the world where the U.S. government and the Space Force are trying to figure out what's happening and how they can mitigate, kind of the disaster that might be moving. So it follows a young female astronaut pilot who uses her wits and technology at the time to help basically save humanity and give us a fighting chance at what's going on. That's a real quick read. It's just a hair over 30,000 words. So, it's a nice kind of rainy day book you could sit through and, crank it out in a couple hours, depending on how fast you read. That just came out, so it's super fresh. Chris has a couple copies waiting for you to go pick them up at the store. And back to the original series that we had, The Dragon and the Whites. So my very first book that I wrote, published back in 2017, it follows the story of a young man named Liam who basically loves to hike and camp and spend his time outdoors in the mountainous regions of New England, primarily New Hampshire and Vermont. And through one of his jaunts up in Maine, he finds a cave where there is a sleeping dragon that he accidentally wakes up. And the dragon escapes and starts to kind of rain destruction upon the land. and it's up to him to bring this dragon to justice. So he spends the next decade of his life hunting this dragon down, mostly by himself, and the story follows his battle with the dragon. I don't want to give too much away because obviously I want you to still go and enjoy the reading of the book, and I don't want to give the suspense away. But after that, the story continues in Washington's Dragon Hunter, and this makes its way over to kind of more a Vermont area. Like I said, it focuses primarily on real locations in New England. I love to camp and hike myself, and I want to read about places that I enjoy going. And most fantasy novels that you read take place in these, mythological worlds that are fun. And, it's kind of like, going to Mordor. It's awesome to dream about it, but you can't go there. I mean, you can fly to New Zealand, but that's as close as you're going to get. Well, I wanted my stories to take place in places that you could physically drive to within just a couple hours and go check out and kind of feel like you're there. And it's really fun for me. I went to some of these places just once or twice. Some of them I grew up very close by and spent a lot of time. And it's really neat going to those locations and remembering how I incorporated them into the story and kind of feeling that, maybe there's a dragon like right around the corner or something. It kind of adds a little fun element to it. So Washington's Dragon Hunter picks up where Dragon of the Whites leaves off. It involves a shadowy government agency called the Program that ends up having their hands kind of muddying the waters of Liam's life, and he doesn't even know it at the time. It complicates things a little bit, and we see Liam get sucked into sort of a government plot that he had no knowledge of, and suddenly finds himself kind of a pawn in the system. And the dragon and Liam end up having their relationship changed a little bit than it was in The Dragon of the Whites. And then the third in the trilogy, and like I said, it's a trilogy, but it doesn't mean the story ends there. It just wanted to kind of formally close out this segment of the story within this world that I've created. And this is Dragon Liberator. Dragon Liberator comes a little bit closer to home. Part of it takes place in Worcester, right next to me where I live. And we kind of see some closer to home locations if you're a Massachusetts resident, where Liam, the dragon, and the rest of the cast and characters from the story interact with. And we see a closing of several key kind of plot elements from the story, and we kind of put them to bed. Very exciting, my favorite book that I've ever written out of the four, and it was a lot of fun kind of bringing the story from my brain down to text. So if you haven't read it yet, I hope you do. And I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. And I hope you go check out the places, especially if you're a hiker, because part of it involves one of my most favorite mountains out in Western Mass that we destroy some landmarks in the process. It's always one of my favorite hobbies of destroying things in a literary manner and taking them out. So, if you like watching dragons smash things, then check this out.
Cool. Yeah. Well, I've read the first one, Dragon and the Whites. Very good. A lot of action. One thing I liked and enjoyed about it is, without, again, you said not giving away too much, is first part of the book has some historical fiction in it, starting way back with the Vikings. And I found that very interesting. Did you do any research? Any research that went into that part of the book?
Excuse me. So that's a great question, Chris. So the reason why I actually started the location where I did is I did a semester abroad while I was in college, and I actually went to Iceland for a semester, and we ended up camping on this island, Vestmannar, just off the coast of Reykjavik, where we did the majority of our project. And we camped on this island that used to comprise itself of, I think, like 3 sort of major volcanoes, and one of them actually detonated and blew outward, and it left this big, like, C-shaped mountain, and we camped inside the crater, and it was one of the coolest experiences of my life. And I spent the weekend basically hiking the volcano and playing with goats up on the side of the mountain, and it was just like a really weird, surreal experience. And, I was only 19 at the time. It was really neat. And I kind of fell in love with the culture while we were there, because everybody in Iceland is of, some Nordic descent, and just the language and the food and the history, it was great. It wasn't the whole horns on helmets thing that, now we know like they didn't really do, but it was the pride behind seafaring and the pride of combat and family, and I really loved it. And then I ended up marrying my wife, who is of Swedish descendancy. So I started looking into it more, and I tried to involve as much realistic aspects and facts behind the family, the way they operated on these explorations, and how they would go about a real trip like this. So I tried to have it sound and feel as real as possible, and not just be some narrative that had just, flaming swords running around, burning stuff down that, is fun to watch on, some TV show, but I wanted it to be as realistic as possible. Sometimes it might feel almost kind of boring because it's not, made for a movie, but I wanted it to be as authentic as I could, and kind of pay homage to the people for the things that they fought and died for, traveling across the Atlantic, coming over here. So there's a heavy aspect of that in the reading, because I wanted to have it be something that could actually happen. And, as we see, if you watch shows like The Curse of Oak Island or something that I love, you see all these things popping up, and you're like, wow, this really could have happened. This crew really could have come over from Iceland with this dragon egg, and this might not just be fiction. This might have happened, and that's what I love reading in stories that I read. I like having that, just tiny sliver of truth in there that makes you kind of question, like, could this really happen? So I tried to put that into the first book as much as I could.
Was there any particular myth or legend that you kind of based that beginning of the book off of?
So the stories that I understood were basically, they came over from Norway, Sweden, and Leif Erikson had his crew, and they came over. They settled in Reykjavik, and then, as far as we know, looking at different historical facts, they believe that they went from Iceland over to Greenland, over to Newfoundland, and then branched out from there. And you see the different stories about them finding stones in locations that are used as kind of like wayfaring guides. And so I don't really have a particular myth per se, but I try to take into account legitimate stories of seafaring and pieces of evidence that we found here in, quote unquote, the New World, that points back to the different Viking clans coming over. So yeah, there's not really like a myth per se, but more like tangible factoids strung together with dragons involved.
Some more of the historical stuff, as the Vikings were supposedly the first ones to settle in North America, Newfoundland, or at least, have a little something. So why dragons? When you started, so you say you started writing about 5 years ago or so. What drew you to write about dragons and not, well, you're a mechanical engineer, why not robots?
So perfect time to be talking about this, as we were just joined by the Dragon Queen herself.
Yes, hi, Elena.
I grew up loving dinosaurs. Everything I did was dinosaur related, and that's just kind of what I gravitated towards as a kid. So when I got a little bit older and started, reading fantasy novels and watching, different sci-fi and fantasy movies, I gravitated right towards dragons, because dragons are basically dinosaurs with big wings and they breathe fire. Why wouldn't you like them? And yeah, so when I was trying to pick kind of a way to go about it, I started writing the story as just a Viking on this island on Vestmannaeyjar over the North Atlantic, and there wasn't even dragons involved. I wrote maybe like a 2-chapter part, and it was just this kid screwing around with a sword, and that was basically how I started writing. And then I put it down for like 2 years, and it was just a Google Doc sitting there and never touched it. And then out of nowhere, I just was like, I got to start doing this again. I already have 2 chapters down. but it's got to be something more exciting. I can't just write about this kid coming across the Atlantic. What element can I put into it? So yeah, I chose dragons. But it's funny that you raise it because I have a bullet list of like to-do items for writing, and there's a robot story in there. So I haven't turned my back on the world of robots. It's just in the queue. So probably maybe like 1 or 2 books away in my to write order that I have laid out for me. There's going to be probably another locally oriented robot story. So you and I will be talking about that again in maybe like 3 or 4 years at my current pace of 1 book per year. So we'll see how that goes.
So do you, one of the things that I noticed too in your first book was there was a lot of, or a few anyways, pop culture references. When you visited our store, I think it was last year, I think it was, you did read a section from the book, and there was, they were flying in an airplane, and there was some sort of pop culture sci-fi references in that.
Yeah, so I think the Cessna's call sign is TK4201 or TK401. I'm sure I'm going to regret saying it wrong before, but I am a big sci-fi and fantasy fan. I love movies, I love books, and I love to kind of pay like homage to the things that entertain me. So yeah, if you read my books, you'll find there's lots of tiny Star Wars references and to a bunch of other things that I enjoy. Like at one point, I think I needed a passcode for something, and I used the license plate from the Bluesmobile and Blues Brothers. There's different Star Wars things in there. I think there's like an Indiana Jones reference at one point. I love to include landmarks from the locations. Like I said, I want it to be real. There's a couple of them that I've tweaked, like when as a resident of Dover, you've probably been to Manchester before, and my favorite restaurant is the Puritan Backroom. I love going to the Puritan for some ice cream, a mudslide, and some chicken tenders. But because they're a close enough location, and maybe they didn't like me burning the building down, I changed it to the Pilgrim. But there are more prominent names of buildings that are like public domain that I totally just use the real name and burn them right to the ground as you read through the different stories. So yeah, I love to include little references so that if you are a fan of the same things I am as you're reading them, you will hopefully have a little smile creep across your face as you hear it or read it. And I don't take myself too seriously when it comes to this stuff. So if I put something in there, I want people to enjoy it and to laugh while they read. It's not 100% serious writing. I want them to enjoy the story, but I also want to have a good time while we're writing and reading. So yeah, you'll see little stuff like that creep in there. I try not to be obnoxious about it, but I try to put them in enough just to keep it spicy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was quite the scene on in your first book on top of Mount Washington with the Mount Washington Observatory. I'll just kind of leave it at that.
Yeah, I love hiking up there. I love seeing it, but it was not on fire enough last time I was there, so I had to change that.
So
There's
your
a bunch
second
of snow on it now, though, so it'd probably extinguish it.
So your new book, Eggs in Two Baskets. You said it was, yep, Eggs in Two Baskets. I've gotten through most of it. I was really trying to finish it before tonight, but I wasn't able to do that. But it was very interesting. Kind of 2 stories in one. You've got the one astronaut going out to, there's an asteroid coming, plus you have this pandemic going on. What made you decide to write that, other than what's sort of happening right now?
So I have always kind of had an asteroid disaster story in the back of my mind, and like I said, I have a Google Doc where I just have a bunch of bullet points of things that I could incorporate at some point, or maybe a bullet is a whole story there, or maybe it's just one thing I slip into a story at some point. So I hate the idea that we're unprepared for an asteroid to wipe us out. It's happened before, so we should probably get ready. how can I incorporate that into a story, especially a sci-fi one? So it's always just been on the back burner. Wasn't going to touch it. I didn't really think I had a story behind it. But then when everything started back up in March, and I was just reading on, Facebook and Twitter, all the conspiracy theories, people talking about, how this all started, whose fault it was, what the repercussions were. And I'm not going to get into it now because I'm not going to start a fight in the comment section. But, I had my own opinions of these things I was hearing. Some of them I thought were complete crackpot ideas, and some I was like, well, there's a little bit of merit there, but let's take the aluminum foil hat off, and it's maybe not as bad as you think. Obviously, let's wear a mask, let's be safe, let's keep 6 feet apart, which is a personal mantra of mine. I don't want anybody coming close to me, anyways, unless they're looking to talk about books or dragons. But basically, how could I express my ridiculous commentary that I have to these conspiracy theories that I hear being thrown around left and right? And I was like, well, I gotta make a story about it. So what started was me kind of trying to deal emotionally with everything I was being bombarded with online, on the news, on Facebook, talking to my own family, and how can I kind of therapeutically deal with it? And the way to do that was to craft my own kind of real life conspiracy theory. And it was basically my opinion of, if this were actually going to be a crafted, government oriented pandemic, how would it have happened? Why would it have happened? What was the motive behind it? And, was there actually a value added reason for this happening? You hear people talking about trying to thin out the elderly and get rid of kids and trying to take out people of different races. And no, this is me putting a non-specific, non-gender, non-race oriented way of how would I want to have a pandemic be unleashed upon the world and what would come out of it. So this is my take on, a conspiracy theory and why it would happen and could there be a benefit to it. So yeah, you're going to read it and probably think that's insane, but that's okay. It's just my kind of fun way to kind of jazz things up a little bit. I've had probably 15 people beta read it, and everybody liked it. I had a good review that I saw on a website one time, but at the same time, I sent it off to Kirkus, and they tore it apart. So yeah, kind of batting right down the middle. But no, most people that I've talked to, actual legitimate readers, have told me that they enjoyed it and thought it was a fun, quick read. Like I said, it's a novella. It started off as a 5,000 word entry into a short story contest that one of the organizations I belong to, they were putting out there, and I blew past 5,000 words, and I was like, all right, well, looks like I'm not using this for the contest. And I just kept going and going. It ended up being 30,000. So it's just, barely dipping its toe into the novella category. But yeah, it's just a fun, quick read. So if you like government conspiracy theories, if you like space-based travel, if you're interested to see, what the Space Force, our newest branch of the military, could actually be applied to and how it could be beneficial, and you like kind of asteroid apocalyptic destruction movies, then I think this could be a good story for you.
Which
so
did you
thank
find
you
harder?
personally for starting it, and I hope you enjoy it as you burn through the rest.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it so far. Which did you find more difficult to write, that one or the Dragon books?
Yes and no to both, but for different reasons. So I found, and still find, because I was writing earlier today for the next Dragon story. The Dragon stories I find easier to write because it's very much fictional, and I can kind of put my own twist on it and kind of write whatever I want. But what I have a hard time with is making it flow properly and not getting too wordy, and it kind of comes down to the more like hardcore, just base writing issues that I have. Whereas the sci-fi story I found easier to control because it was much more realistic, and I tried to keep everything as accurate and real as possible. What I found hard was making sure all my numbers were right, because I was trying to actually stay real. I needed to kind of keep myself in check. And it's like, if you're going to be real, then be real all the way. So what I actually had was one of my friends is a retired Air Force colonel, and I have another friend who works in an observatory down in Connecticut. So they respectively helped me with the military jargon and kind of aerospace aspects. And then my friend Mark down at the observatory actually helped me craft a lot of the wording and numbers and kind of lingo to use in observing the bodies moving through space, how fast they travel, like the energy they have, impact velocities, all that kind of stuff. You know, if you're going to go big, you know, go big. And that's what I had difficulty was trying to make it as accurate as possible. Whereas when I'm writing dragon stories, I can say the dragon fires whatever temperature I want, and then it's going to melt metal because it's just how hot I said it was. And a dragon can fly as fast as I wanted to, and it can fly as high as I wanted to. I don't care about updrafts and thermal currents and lift coming off its wing design and stuff. Like, whatever, it's fantasy, make it up. So yeah, I guess I can inherently write fantasy better, but then I get bogged down in the proper writing techniques because my background isn't in English or literature. I have 2 master's degrees in engineering. I have never taken an English class past my senior year in high school. I went to a college that was very engineering and math focused, and my humanities aspects were a little smaller. So yeah, I kind of have to learn a lot of this on the fly. I do a lot of Google searching for how to properly word phrases and put sentences together to make it so it actually sounds like it was written by a real writer. Whereas the sci-fi, I enjoy it more. It kind of just comes right out. But I feel the tendency to make it more realistic. So maybe I'll let myself write a sci-fi book someday that is so science fiction that it doesn't have any connection to reality at this point, and I could just say whatever I want, and that would be a little more fun. This one was tough because I made it only 30 years in the future, and I tried to have a lot of technology that is available now, but 30 years advanced, so that it felt real when you're reading it as a reader. But you could see like, oh yeah, I guess I could realistically see adaptations and advances taking place in that relatively short period of time. And that's how it could be in 2050.
Were any of your friends your beta readers? After you got the information from them, you put it all together. Did you use them also as your beta readers?
Yeah. So Ken and Mark were 2 of my beta readers, and then I had just a bunch of friends who just wanted to read it because they just like free books and they just want to, kind of burn through it and give me their good feedback. So yeah, I have a nice crew of beta readers that for the most part will not hold back, and they'll let me know if my shenanigans are getting too ridiculous, and they'll point out different typos and grammatical errors and stuff like that. Because I know when I first started, my dad and my wife were the first 2 people that read my first book, and I love them, but they were like, "Oh, this is great." It's like, come on, tear it apart. Like, let me know what's wrong. It's like, blast it apart and let me figure out how to fix it. I think, when you write your first book, nobody wants to trash you. Everybody wants to be nice about it. But by the time I got to my second book, my wife was my proofreader right off the bat. And she, went through like a whole Post-it note of, Post-its, putting notes down for different things that I messed up and goofed on. So, yeah, now to the point now where people know that my skin is thick enough and that I want the constructive criticism.
We have Elena Mugden, a self-proclaimed dragon queen. We've had her books in the store too, and we've had her in quite a few times. We started our series here with her. She has a few questions that she'd like to ask you. So Elena, if you want to go ahead and bring up your mic and your video, feel free to ask your questions. Elena?
Do you want me to unmute her? I was going to say maybe she's trying to talk.
There we go. Well, while she's working on that, I'll go ahead and give her. Yeah, first one. Let's see. What's next for you in terms of your writing projects?
So right now, what I'm doing is basically taking pockets of the story from the Dragon and the White series where, maybe I glossed over something. And in the story, I said 2 months later, and then carry the story on, because I had an idea of what happened there, but I didn't want to include every single thing because it would take forever to get to the conclusion of the story. But in my mind, I always knew something happened there. There's a story, so let's put a sentence in that just says, and Liam did this. He went over there, and blah blah blah. Now we're over in New Hampshire. We're driving down the road. It's kind of like Elaine's old yada yada yada. So I took a whole bunch of those yada yada yadas, and I just had a running bullet list. And now I'm up to like 20 bullets between the 3 books, where I just thought there's a story there. I just don't know how long the story is. It might be 500 words. It might be 20,000 words. So what I started doing was just expanding them out. And some, like I said, became a paragraph. And it's just a quick little like flash fiction. And one of them is actually up to 15,000 words right now. So it's almost kind of like its own standalone short story, or a novelette, whatever people call it. And I'm putting those all into a thematically related omnibus. As you'll know, I have the Dragon and the White's Omnibus Volume 1, which is the 3 books together as a single book. I forgot to grab it, but it's over on my bookshelf in my library. And I'm making the Omnibus Volume 2 right now. So what I'm going to do is compile all those together. So if you have read the trilogy and you really loved it and you're like, hey, I want more dragons and I want to find out what Liam and his friends were up to, and how come there were these holes in the story. Well, they weren't really holes. They were just glossed over at the time, but they weren't forgotten about. And that is my current writing project right now, is plugging up all those holes and really bringing the full story to light. There's one of them that I think could just be its own book. We'll see if I decide to take it further than that. But I'm having a lot of fun writing these little short stories. I'm not a big short story writer. Like I said, I tried to write a short story and it became a novella because I goofed and I don't know how to write less than 60,000 words. So I'm hoping that this will be a good experience to help practice controlling my writing word length, while at the same time bringing more light and character to the story that I've crafted. So yeah, if you're a fan of the Dragon and the Whites, stay tuned. We're almost to 2021. I'm basically calling it for 2022 right now. I should have that, written, edited, beta read, and published at some point. Then I have kind of a more personal story that I'm probably going to write next. That's not necessarily a memoir, but it will be about a significant aspect of my life that happened when I was younger. And I'm going to try to turn that into a real story. Whether or not I actually finish it and feel comfortable publishing it, that's to be determined. But yeah, expect dragons next, some kind of story, and then robots, probably book 3 will be after that. So if you're looking for robots from me, hang tight. There's plenty of awesome other robot books. Go to a Free Thinker's Corner and go to the sci-fi section. I'll tide you over while you wait. But that's my current writing right now. And I know what you're saying next. Are you planning to do anything for NaNoWriMo? No. So I have a pretty hectic work schedule and a 4.5-year-old who is very playful right now. So my writing is really sporadic. I'll have time. Oh, there she is. Now her camera's working.
I'm not ready for being on camera. Apologies.
No, that's okay. I was going to say, I wasn't expecting armor and everything. You wore that last time. And I claimed I was going to wear my armor this time, but I was too tired to get all suited up. So no armor for me today. But yeah, so NaNoWriMo doesn't really happen for me simply because I can't make myself write. Like, what's the NaNoWriMo target? 50,000 words? I have written 50,000 in a month before. I've also written 0 words in a month before, and I'd lie if I said I didn't worry about it. But I give myself a pass because, maybe something crazy was going on at work. So, yeah, basically I'll go through spurts where I'll write out like 20,000 words in, like a week. And then I won't write anything for a month. I try to really make myself write at least a paragraph a day so that I stick to it. It's basically like working out. You know, the second you stop writing, then you just think like, oh, I didn't write. I'll write tomorrow. You know, I'll write in the morning. Well, if you don't develop a routine, if you don't kick yourself in the butt to do it, you're never going to do it. So yeah, I don't do NaNoWriMo, but I get excited watching lots of, you know, author tubers talking about doing their NaNoWriMo stuff. I like looking for advice. I basically take their advice and I try to live vicariously through their enthusiasm, while I kind of sit back and write a little less of my own. But no, maybe someday I'll do it just to kind of jump in on the fun. I know that there's a lot of cool tools out there and everything where you can track your word counts and see how you fare against your target. But no, right now it's not for me. But I do kind of regret not doing it, just to, you know, I like getting caught up in the moment.
It's a commitment. I did it last
Yeah.
year and I actually very much enjoyed it. And I wanted to do it this year really a lot, but now I've hit a stumbling block with book 4. So I'm a little burnt out, but we'll see. Now I'm pushed through. I'm almost done with the book 4 edit. So if I can finish it before November starts, maybe I'll just dive into something in November. Who knows?
Yeah, I think book 4 was perfect just the way it was.
Thank you.
You go ahead and you publish it whenever you're ready, and the hater's gonna hate. I thought it was a good story, and it was my most exciting one I've read of yours so
I
far.
appreciate that. It was this individual, you know, I could kind of tell from her tone it wasn't her cup of tea, and she hadn't read the previous books, and I think that had something to do with it. So some of the things she said to me actually, you know, like I needed to hear, and you were talking about beta readers earlier, like some of the things I did need to hear, and I think we can all, as writers, commiserate with that. You know, we've all had like some hard, tough pills to swallow when it comes to criticism and critiques. And I think the important thing to remember is that not everything you write is going to be for everybody. But like I developed this mental block against it. But I'm like, I pushed through it, you know? So we're getting back to a sense of normalcy, as it were.
Cool. And for those who don't know, Alana has written Dragon Speaker and the rest of the Shadow War saga. So I highly recommend you pick those up at a Free Thinkers Corner if you haven't read them yet. Like she said, book 1, 2, and 3 of a 5-part series are out right now. And she's just wrapping up the edits of book 4, which I beta read just a little while ago. Oh, thank you. And I thought book 4 was terrific. So I say you go ahead. Ooh, the whole question there. Nice.
For those who don't know, the NaNoWriMo is the National Novel Writing Month. It takes place during November 1st, November 30th for writers. It's internet-based creative writing project. Takes the whole month, and the participants attempt to write 50,000-word manuscript between that time, and kind of give themselves pep talks and to keep them motivated to writing. It's really neat. I thought about giving it a try this year, but I'm just way too busy. So her other question is, what do you think about time travel stories, anything like that in the possible future? Pun intended.
So I'll say that time travel and how it manipulates things occurring are one of the most mind-bending things for me to watch. You know, I grew up watching Back to the Future, and you know, I love the scene in Avengers Endgame when they're all talking about how they're going to go back in time and how all of it is, you know, phooey and it doesn't really work that way. And, you know, Paul Rudd is naming off all the movies that he loves. And it's just funny because, you know, part of me thinks like, yeah, if you go back in time, you can screw things like that and you can bring stuff back and forth. It's not going to affect things. And then at the same time, I look at the way they're talking about it. It's like your past is now your future and your future is your other past. And just blows my head apart. So I love seeing time travel stuff in stories, in movies, in books. I'm not sure I'm ever going to touch it from a writing standpoint, simply because I don't know what I could bring to the table that's different that hasn't already been done. But at the same time, I'm not crossing it off. Like I said, I just dipped my toe into the sci-fi world for the first time from a writing perspective. Don't get me wrong, my other stories are, I call them fantasy / sci-fi, but they're definitely more fantasy than sci-fi, whereas Eggs in Two Baskets is purely sci-fi. There's really no fantasy element to it. So I know it's your personal favorite, but I wouldn't expect a book coming from me anytime soon. But like I said, I'm not saying that's never going to happen. Maybe that's something that will be further down the road after I've had time to put it on the back burner and think about it. So, but thank you for your questions.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you use like some people use support groups and other writing groups, the NaNoWriMo. You said you used YouTube and to Google how to put sentences together, things like that. Do you belong to any writers groups that you play off of?
So I formally belong to the Rhode Island Authors Association, but that's more from a kind of logistical standpoint because they do a lot of good events. My writing advice comes more from kind of close friends and other writers. Like Elena and I write back and forth a lot. My friend Stephen Lomer, who has the Title Squad series, we write back and forth a lot, and my stepbrother Tom is an editor. So he actually edited my first book, The Dragon and the Whites. So I have a handful of people that I talk to on a personal level back and forth to get advice and tips and tricks and stuff like that. But no, I think after COVID is over and we can see people again, there's a group nearby in Worcester, and there's a nice one in Lancaster that are close to me, where I think I'm probably going to start getting involved because, like I use the analogy that writing is like going to the gym, where if you're not accountable for it, you're not going to get it done. So I think if I join up with some sort of crew and we all talk about what we're going to write that week and let's talk about it next week when we get together, I'm going to feel like an idiot if I show up and tell them I wrote 0 words since I saw them last. So if I have that support group, I'm going to feel accountable and I'm going to have to get my butt off, or well, actually put your butt in a chair and write. But I'm going to have to get to work. And I think it will also then help to kind of get outside my echo chamber of having just a few people that I always talk with who have very similar opinions to me. And, it might help to kind of have like the devil's advocate come back and say, like, well, why did you word that sentence like that? What if you tried it like this? Or how come you don't incorporate this element to it? Even if I disagree with them, it'd be kind of nice to hear more opinions right up front while I'm working through a manuscript. So too long didn't read, not currently involved in real actual writing groups, but I want to. There's a couple that I know of that are nearby, and I could very easily kind of join up with them if I wanted to. But yeah, if you haven't, you watching this out there in, Chris's world, if you haven't written before and you want to, I highly advise you getting involved with a writing group just to see how people do it. I know a lot of times, depending on the group, some of them just use it as an excuse to get together and beta read each other's stuff. Some people do writing prompts and they get each other to write live right there. It's almost like taking a literature class. And I know Alana right now is sharing the NaNoWriMo. So it's NaNoWriMo.org. That's the NaNoWriMo.org website. And there's lots of good advice on there where they have different tools that you can utilize to both keep track of your own stuff and to kind of publicly make yourself accountable if you want. I know I see a lot of authors where they'll post, hey, today my goal was to write 2,000 words today. I wrote 2,200, so I'm ahead of my goal. Or, I only wrote 1,800 words and 200 behind on, today's goal. And, if you post that up and you kind of feel like people are watching it, then you are going to feel compelled to deliver and to, kind of really give the people what they want. So yeah, it's weird for me because I spent a lot of time going to college where you were graded, and if you don't do the work, you're going to get a bad grade. You're not going to get your degree. And writing, I just do it completely by myself. So there's no accountability there aside from me wanting to deliver and have more books there. I wrote the first book for my son. It was basically going to be a Word doc that I was just going to print out for him and read to him at some point. And I had so much fun reading it, or writing it, and then reading it to my wife and my family that it prompted me to then have another book, because I felt kind of weird going to my first couple book fairs with only one book. So I literally dove back into writing because I wanted to be, an author. I wanted to have a full story. So then I had my own personal motivation to continue the story and get out there and tell people what else could have happened outside the one book that I wrote. And that is my personal goal, is just making myself write, because I want to share my stories that are trapped up in here with people, whether it's, a digital PDF or it's a paperback book. So yeah, long story short, try NaNoWriMo, go out there, write. You're not writing if you don't start, and you're not going to write anything really well until you write a bunch of bad stuff. So it's kind of like, it's like cooking, you got to make a lot of bad food before you learn how to make the good food. So yeah, don't be afraid to start writing. Just write whatever you're thinking about and go from there.
Is your 4.5-year-old a fan of dragons?
Yes. So we have a whole bunch of, plastic and rubber dragons around the house. We have a 9-foot inflatable dragon that is just on the other side of the wall here. I can hear the motor running out there.
Nice.
Yeah, there's a lot of draconian stuff in our house. Not as much as, is that the same one? Did we just become best friends?
Same one. It's Shivnap.
Yeah, I was just saying, excuse me, my son is becoming quite the little nerd here to take my place. So yeah, there are some days where he doesn't feel like my son, and he actually feels like the little brother that I never had. So yeah, right as soon as we're done with this call, I'm gonna go out and play Legos with him in the living room. So
there you go. There you go.
So yeah, we have a lot of fun together.
So let's talk about your writing process. What is your process when you do decide to, you have the time to sit down, because you are a busy person with your activities and your work. When you do have the time, what is your process? Do you like to write in the morning? Do you like to write in the evening, or just sort of when you have time?
I'm probably more of a lunchtime and late evening writer. So basically the morning is spent, everybody's getting ready for work. I don't wake up early and watch the sunrise with my coffee in my hand. No, I roll out of bed after I hit snooze like 6 or 7 times and just make it to work in the nick of time. But I don't go to sleep very easily. So I stay up late and like to write. And then a lot of times I'll write while I eat lunch. And my kind of methodology is I will bulletize everything I'm thinking, simply so that I can just get it out there. Because like I said, people talk about being a pantser and a planter. I don't have the ability to just write from what I'm thinking about off the top of my head and just go nuts. I can't do that. I plan everything out. I started writing utilizing Excel spreadsheets, but then, I hated moving stuff around in cells. So now I basically just do everything in Word. I write out in bullets. I try to get every major idea that I can down. If I have sub ideas, I just make sub bullets, and then I can go and just cut and paste things around, get it into the order that I think it's going to work for a story. And then a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just start at the first bullet and I'll just start writing. And a lot of times I can start to see how chapters would evolve from there. So maybe I'll start to segregate things right away. And then, what I'll try to do is then each bullet becomes a paragraph, and then each paragraph then just flows and goes from there. So some paragraphs might turn into 2 pages. Some might turn into 30 or 40 pages, depending on how many characters it was going to have involved and what aspect of the plot it was going to, partake of. And that is kind of my writing process. I'm sure that there's better ones, but that's the one that works for me. I know I follow a lot of people on YouTube that talk about just sitting down and just cranking stuff out and writing. I can't. I'm thinking about 50,000 different things at once, and I need to organize it in some way. And by having a systematic process that I work through, it helps me kind of get through it. So like I do a lot of project management stuff at work, and we have what we call stage gates. And I basically make myself work through a stage gate system where I can't start writing until I bulletized everything. Once I bulletize the story, then I can start doing my paragraph writing. And once I do all the paragraph writing, then I can start the long, drawn-out actual story writing. And then I'll typically make like a character and legend in the background where I write out a couple paragraphs for each character so I know what they look like, their brief synopsis of their history, how they're interrelated to other people. I know there are different programs like Scrivener and other things out there that help you do this stuff more technically, but no, I just use a lot of bullets and, you know, page separations. So yeah, I'm an MS Office junkie.
Do you carry
I don't know
around?
if that answers your question. I kind of just rambled for a while.
Yeah, no. Do you carry around like a notebook with you, or a little DVR or something, digital voice recorder? Whenever you get a thought of, hey, I think this would be good, or you hear a name, or
So no, I've looked into different voice recording, voice to text things, but no, a lot of times what I find works best is I always have my laptop with me because I'm just always working on something, and I always have Wi-Fi. If I am out and about and I think of something, what I'll do is I'll literally just text myself, and then later that night I'll just read what I texted, and I'll just have it sitting there. But no, if I'm trying to think about something, it will usually stir on the back of my brain throughout the day. And by the time I go to sit down at my laptop next, I've kind of thought about how I'm really going to do it. I do a lot of my development while I drive to work. I have a half an hour commute each way. So most of the time I'm doing audiobooks, but there'll be mornings where I'll be getting in the car and I'll think like, oh, that's how I'm going to do it. I'll turn the audiobook off, and I literally will just narrate that story aspect to myself while I drive. And by the time I get to work, typically I'll have it fleshed out at least into something I could put into words in some shape or form. And, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll sit right down and I'll go to where that part is in my manuscript that I'm currently working on. And even if I don't like write per se, I'll still jot down like 3 or 4 sentences that sort of comprise what I was thinking. And then later that night when I get home and, my son's already asleep and I have time to write, then I'll, read those 4 sentences again and then flesh it out and develop it. But no, I don't have like a set time. Sometimes I'll write while I eat lunch. Sometimes I write at 8 p.m. Sometimes I write at midnight, and I'll write for half an hour or something and go to bed, No, I really should have a routine to try to get more systematic and consistent with my writing. But right now it's a complete shotgun approach. I just write whenever I get the time and whatever my level of mental sanity is that day.
Now, of course,
which is why I'm not a professional. What's that?
No, go ahead, finish.
There's a reason I still have my day job and I'm not a professional writer. So, no, I really need to at some point just devote a lot more time to it and make it my gig. So, yeah. But no, right now I consider what I'm doing kind of like my writing internship. I'm building my resume and I'm getting my foot out there, and at some point maybe I'll be talking to you, and instead of saying he's a mechanical engineer by day, you'll just say author Tim Baird. That's the 5 or 10 year plan right now.
Yep. No, I was going to say, of course, you get your audiobooks from Libro.fm, right? Because they support local bookstores. That's where that other Audible book, audiobook company there who shall not be named, they don't.
So I will come clean with you. Right now, I don't believe I have mine configured to be dispersed universally. But I love what Libro FM does, and I think it's a great idea, and I plan on having my current audiobooks updated to be on a general disbursement or whatever the technical term is that we use as I make my future ones through it. So yes, if you haven't signed up for Libro FM, I highly recommend you, as the watcher of this video, to go ahead and do that, because it will keep your local bookstores alive that you love to go and visit. The company that shall not be named is not there to support you. So.
So what made you decide to go with independent publishing instead of a publisher, traditional publishing?
So it's kind of weird from two different standpoints. So let's work backwards. So this right here, like I said, was a super quick, I cranked it out in just like 2 months, and I wanted to just have fun with it. And I didn't really want anybody telling me like, oh, that's not good enough, don't publish it. It's not, marketable right now. It's a touchy subject. People aren't going to want to read that. It's all doom and gloom. No, it's my story. I wanted to put it out there. I didn't want somebody telling me what I can and can't say. So that one went out there simply because I didn't want somebody censoring me. The Dragon and the Whites, I purposely self-published it because it is a very personal story. My son is the fictionalized protagonist. It involves some family members and close friends and things that are close to my home. And I wanted it to be a story that was exciting for him as a young adult someday and had kind of universal appeal to older readers that are young at heart, but at the same time still be safe for younger readers and not have anything there that would be kind of bad for them to read. And I also didn't want there to be any kind of love aspect. I'm not going to have my son being a protagonist, hooking up with people and stuff like that. I wanted to keep it completely PG. And my fear with going to a traditional publisher would be that say, oh, this doesn't carry these different check boxes. You're going to add the story in, and we can't call him Liam. You're going to get rid of that, and blah, blah. And, it's like, this is my story. I want to tell it the exact way I want to tell it. So I went with, independently published. I went through 2 different, online sources that then get me into different locations and also allow me to just buy books myself to then, promote and sell via great small independent bookstores like you. So that was why those were self-published.
Your screen kind of froze here for a second.
Can you see me now?
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Okay. However, I have, let's say the next story after the one I'm currently writing right now is going to be personal in nature, but not have anything super connected to particular names or the way that the story will go about getting to the message to be delivered. I'm trying to be super vague so I don't give anything away, but it would be to the point where I would be open to criticism and constructive feedback and potential changes that may need to be made that you would encounter in a traditional publishing setting. So obviously I would love to have the marketing power behind some big publishing house and the reach and the personnel and all the jazz that comes with it. But there are the trade-offs that you have where you give up some control over your story and publishing rights and stuff like that. So I didn't do that for my first 4 because I wanted to have 100% of the reins in my hand. But when I finish my current story and I start my next one, I'm going into it knowing that I'm going to query for the first time and be open and ready for people to tear it apart, have me change things, and potentially make it not the story it started out as, because I'm not going to have that vested sense of this is my story, can't touch it, that I did with my other ones. So yeah, I think there's a place in the world for both. I think there are pros and cons to both traditional and self-publishing. But I think self-publishing done correctly is great. I think there are a lot of self-published books out there that were probably published too quickly. Looking back at some of the stuff I've done, there were steps that I skipped that knowing what I know now. I kind of wish there almost were more checks and balances. Self-publishing is sometimes too easy. But at the same time, there are so many authors trying to get into traditional publishing houses that it can be prohibitive to a newer person that doesn't have, like John Grisham or Tom Clancy name or something behind them where they could just write whatever they want. It's going to get published. Me, I'm just another fish in a big sea of, authors trying to get their books out there. So yeah, self-publishing to me is great. I think it was a fun, easy way to get my story out there. But I'm 100% in charge of my own marketing, getting editors, getting cover designs. So it's daunting if you've never done it before. But I had fun researching all the different ways to go about it, and I had a really good time with it. So yeah, I mean, if you're looking to publish a book, or somebody watching the video is, there are pros and cons to each approach, and there are really great things about traditional publishing, and there are really great things about independent publishing. You kind of decide to what you want to get out of it personally, and how you want your product, i.e. your book, to be in the end, and then you can kind of choose your path from there.
What are some of the things that you wish you had done, or that you learned along the way, that were important in the follow-up books?
Beta reading is huge. If you are traditionally publishing, you have so many eyes that see a book that the chance of you slipping through typos and grammatical errors and plot holes and anything that shouldn't be in the final product, if it gets to final publication, then it's kind of rare. You have so many eyes and hands that are going to be on that book. There's a smaller chance of something slipping through. But when you're self-publishing, you're kind of in control of who's going to read it before you hit submit on that final copy of your manuscript. So when I wrote my first book, I was not embarrassed, but I was kind of very shy about it because I had never written a book before. I live in the world of design and math and physics and engineering, and I, create things all day long in CAD systems and get them machined, and I'm super comfortable doing it. But, this was my first book. I was very timid about it. And I didn't even tell my wife that I was writing the book until I finished my, zero draft of my first manuscript, because it was just kind of weird to say like, oh, I'm writing a book, and then what am I going to do? Sit there for a couple months and not talk about it, because I didn't really want to get it out there. So in retrospect, I wish I was not so shy about it, and I wish I shared it with more people and had them read it right from the start, because there was a bunch of things where probably the first couple months of having my first novel published, I made edits and then re-uploaded my manuscript so that then the next whatever book was being printed after that point would have the updates in it. And I published that very first manuscript when I shouldn't have. It wasn't ready for showtime. There was a bunch of typos and grammatical errors that made its way through. I just had one person edit it, only one person read it. But then if people were reading it, they were coming back and be like, hey, check out page 136. It has this error on line 10. I was like, oh, geez, I can't believe I let that through. So what I would say to anybody watching this, if you are getting your book published, don't be afraid to share it. The more people that read it, they're going to give you good feedback. They're going to tell you things that are missing, maybe paragraphs or sentences that are run on and too long. You could clean it up a little bit. Or they'll tell you like, hey, this thing's missing and you should have another character over here. Or, this is a boring section. Put something jazzy in there to make it more fun. They're going to give you those little things that you're not going to get in a review online, and you're probably not going to get from your editor if they're just doing line edits. You really kind of need that developmental editing. You need the line editing. You need the copy editing. You need somebody to read it and give you honest feedback. They're not afraid to hurt your feelings.
Well, that's the big thing, is to make sure that you have somebody who will give you honest feedback, not just your friends and family who say, "Yo, yeah, it was a great book, but not give you that feedback. So, you know what? That line really didn't work. That paragraph really didn't work." Those are the people that you want to be honest and upfront with you.
Yeah, because now is not the time to be all cutesy about it and hug and have a good time. But at the same time, you also got to find people that know how to be tactful about it. I've had some feedback come through where you're like, hey, like, go easy on it. Like, that's my baby. I spent 2 years working on that. Maybe wear boxing gloves instead of hitting me with your bare knuckles. But at the same time, you need that honesty. So you need to find people who will be honest with you, and you also need to mentally and emotionally prepare yourself to handle harsh feedback. You got to find that kind of Goldilocks zone where you are open and honest with your own thoughts about it, but you also need people who will be honest and still considerate of your feelings when they beta read your stuff. So yeah, it's a harsh world out there. So the more you can prepare yourself before you get there, the less likely you are to get a bad review online and have people trash your stuff in, articles or wherever they'll get written about it. Plus, there's just the embarrassment side. Like I remember when I found my first typo after the book was in paper, like an idiot. So yeah, you definitely need editors, you need beta readers, you need to have somebody good design your cover. I know plenty of authors who are really good at Photoshop and all the different programs out there who can do their own covers. Then by all means, go nuts. I am not an artistic person, so I pay somebody to do my covers. I am pretty good at doing interior layouts, but if you do not know all the little tips and tricks and how MS Word or whatever other program you're using, how it operates, it might behoove you to get somebody to do your interior layouts so that it looks nice. I also highly recommend checking out a bunch of comps, like looking at books that are similar to yours and making sure that yours is kind of up to par with it in terms of what's presented on different pages, even dumb stuff like how you do your copyrights in the beginning, where your acknowledgement page is, how you do, do you always have your new chapters start on an odd page or just have them start on even pages, whatever format you want to do. Look into all that stuff, do your research, go to the bookstore and just look at other books and find a good book that you want yours to feel like, and then emulate what they did in that book. And then the big thing is marketing. Marketing, I still suck at. I will go and do some ads here and there, but my best way I sell books right now is to do things like this, go live to events. I'll go, I'll sell a couple books a week on, different websites. But I'll go to a Comic-Con or a live event in a bookstore and I'll sell 50 books in a day. And that to me is the way I love to sell books. I love to get out there and, prior to COVID-19, shake hands and hug and talk closely to people and tell them the story. So I can market myself well in person, I'd say, but I have a terrible time of doing it properly online. And that's what I need to learn now. I need to learn how to properly get it out there in the right channels and get the ad in front of the right eyes to then draw them somewhere. That's what I need to learn to do. So yeah, there's stuff that I figured out in the meantime, and there's stuff that I'm actively trying to do right now. So you're never done learning. There's always something better that you could be doing.
That's how we met you for the first time. It was at a local vineyard here in New Hampshire. It was a big author event by one of the local publishers, and we saw your books out there, and you had these big, huge signs behind you that had, the cover art of your books on them. There have been some who I know that don't like to spend the money to do that kind of marketing. Do you feel that it's worth that spending? Do you really need to spend money to get yourself out there?
So what I kind of learned was I like going to different video game and board game Comic-Cons. One of my favorite is PAX East, the Penny Arcade exhibition. And you go to these events where you see just table after table after table of the same kinds of people peddling their wares, and everybody is trying to make it in the world. And you can only visit so many tables in a certain period of time. So your eyes naturally gravitate towards more exciting things and more streamlined looking presentations. So, one of the things I told myself when I first started writing my first book was, I don't need a great cover art because you don't judge a book by its cover. But yeah, I will go to a bookstore and I'll see some book that has an okay looking cover, and I see one that has a cool looking cover, and naturally I grab the cool looking cover one, I flip it over, and I start reading the back and see what the synopsis is of the story. So as much as I say that I don't judge a book by its cover, I certainly do actively. So what I tried to do was I didn't want to have crazy gimmicks and all sorts of giveaways. And, like I see people right now making, face masks with their name and book title on it. And, they're giving out lanyards at events. And I don't do a lot of the swag. I ended up making some buttons and I made some stickers just because it was like super cheap and it was kind of fun to have like some little giveaway. Because I know a lot of times I'll have parents and grandparents come to book events with their kids, and little kids love candy and buttons and stuff like that. And if a kid comes by and they're interested in something you got, they always love to play with the dragon and check things out. Then maybe the mom or the grandmom comes down and reads your book. But they aren't going to come over in the first place if they didn't think that your table from 50 feet away was worthwhile coming over to. So I see marketing like that as value added, because you need to first get them to your table in order to tell them about your book. And there's, steps they're going to go through. They have to first get to the table. You then have to tell them about the book. They have to like what you tell them. They have to have money, and they have to want to buy the book. And you got to go through all these different hoops to finally get a book into their hands for them to read. And if the very first one is getting them actually to come to your table, then you get to have something. So typically when you go to a book event, they just give you a folding table, and if you're lucky, there's a tablecloth on it. Most of the time there's not. So I kind of, after my first few events, I sort of came up with a base of what you need. You need to have a white and a black tablecloth, because you never know what you're going to need based on lighting of the room and color of tables near you. If there's people next to me that have black tablecloths, I put a white tablecloth out so that I have contrast and look different. I want to have some sort of three-dimensional element to my table. So I typically will have a little stuffed dragon that I have. Then I have my little play dragon. If it's safe to do so, I'll often bring my sword and put the sword out. I typically don't bring it out if there's little kids, because they love to just grab it by the blade. It's an unsharpened blade, but still I try to be safe. And then I love having the banners. So I have a big banner that goes from the floor up to like 7 feet. And then I also have a tiny one that's 18 inches. And I typically use that if I get a smaller table. So yeah, when I show up to an event, I have basically a big Starlight container just full of everything I think I might need, because you got to have some kind of presentation. I try to say that it's not important to me, but when I go to different places and I'm looking to buy things, my money is only going to go so far. I can't buy everything that's in the room, and I'm going to naturally go towards an area that looks more exciting. So if I'm in a room with 5 other authors, I want my table to look the most exciting so that people come to me first. So yeah, I've seen a lot of people put some like really crazy stuff out that is probably not value added at that point. And there's like a lot of diminishing returns of how much you're paying into your decorations and all that. But I think there's like a base minimum that you kind of need to pay if you want to get yourself up to a certain level of respectability in the customer's eyes.
You mentioned that for your cover art, you outsource that, your artistic skills. What are some of the most important aspects of cover art?
So to give you a little insight, because there's only so many of these out there, this is a collector's item. Here is my first one that I made all by myself. I saw this nice little template that they had, and it was like dragon claws coming down, and it's red, and it was blood, and it was awesome. And I thought this was great. I made this all by myself at like 11 o'clock one night, and it was perfect. And I put a little picture of myself on there, and I was an author. This was in paper, and bam, I was out there. And then I went to a couple book events, and I went to, some local bookstores, and kind of had a heart-to-heart with myself and realized that, my book cover was not really up to par. So yeah, what I did was I started scouring forums and looking for people talking about different cover artists that they work with. And that book then turned into this one. And basically what I wanted was to have some kind of dragon on there, and it had to be the mountains, and I wanted there to be, basically the protagonist in there somewhere. So what I did was I spent a while searching out a cover artist. I gave her the different elements that I was looking for, and then she came up with a couple different concepts, and we settled on this one. So yeah, if you are looking to self-publish, I highly recommend checking out, Reedsy and some other different online places you can go and talk to other authors and cover designers and find the right one for you. Not every cover artist is going to work with every author because their writing might not reflect their artistic style, and vice versa. There's plenty of artists out there that I'm like, I respect your work and I think it looks good, but it's not me. And then once you find that person, then work with him or her to really kind of get what you need. But I highly recommend, if you're going to spend any money on a book, it's going to go to editing and it's going to go to cover art, because people are going to be drawn by the cover, and then they're going to think your book is worthwhile finishing reading if it's edited properly. If you pick up a book and the first 10 pages are full of typos, you might start considering whether or not you finish the book. You might put your bookmark in there, put it on the shelf, and then never touch it again. So, yeah, cover art is pretty important. Obviously, if you're going the traditional route, typically they will have in-house cover artists or artists that they work with on the outside who will do the cover art for you. But then you typically, from what I understand, don't really have a huge say in what the cover art looks like. That's one of the things I love about self-publishing is the cover art is totally my call. If I want the cover art to end up on the book, it's my approval, and I will reject it until it looks like what I want it to look like. So that's another pro for the self-publishing route.
You mentioned editors. There are professional editors out there. Did you use one, or did you just go with your beta readers?
So my first book was technically edited by a professional editor. So my stepbrother Tom mainly does textbooks, but he is a big sci-fi reader, so it kind of just worked out naturally. The second book, I was a little bit of a cheapskate at the time, and I did it purely by beta readers. But I had a good chunk of people reading it. I read through it probably 3 times myself, and I think we did a really good job of catching grammatical errors and typos and cleaning things up nicely. For the third book, I actually got lucky because the cover artist I work with at Creative Digital Studios, her husband is an editor by trade. So she does the cover art and he does editing. So I had always used her for just cover artist work, but I actually had the married couple basically do the 2 biggest jobs for me. So it was kind of fun writing like one check and sending a manuscript out and then just having all this stuff take place in the background from like the same location. So it kind of cut down on communications and streamlined the process a little bit. But yeah, I highly recommend, if you're looking to get a book published and you want it to sound legit, you either need a bunch of beta readers who will catch stuff for you, or hire an editor, or both. If you do both, then the chance of it getting through is going to be very slim by the time it gets to being printed. So
let's go back to audiobooks. This is kind of a fun question that I like to ask is, who would you like to see? What famous voice would you like to have? If you could have anybody, TV star, movie star, musician, anybody who has that voice that you would look for in your characters in your book.
So it's funny because I was actually thinking about this earlier because he's almost done with the newest one. But if you've ever listened to an audiobook by Will Wheaton, he has a really fun voice. So for those of you who don't know, Will Wheaton, he played Wesley Crusher on Star Trek Next Generation. And he's been in, a couple bigger movies like Stand By Me. And but right now he's just sort of living high in the geek world. But he did the audiobook for Ready Player One, and he right now is recording Ready Player Two, which isn't even out yet. So he's like one of the only people that has read it because he's now doing the audiobook for it. And I'm excited for when it comes out because with my workload and, trying to be a good father and be a good husband and still write at the same time, I don't read a ton of paper books anymore, but I devour audiobooks because even if I don't do anything else, I get at least 1 hour round trip in the car per day to do an audiobook. So yeah, I love audiobooks, and I really love when I have a narrator that I can connect with. some of them are just like really dry and they're just reading it, and you can hear them falling asleep on the other end of the microphone. But somebody like Will Wheaton, I think would be great to have someday. And I hope in like 10 years I can look back at this and laugh as like the two of us are sitting there like clinking our beers together as we have like our Pulitzer Prize winning book and nominated, and be like, it was a dream and now it's true, and ha ha ha. So yeah, we'll save this on YouTube and Facebook for me to look back on and laugh about someday. But yeah, that would be kind of my celebrity that I would love to have, because he's only done a handful of audiobooks and I've loved each one he's done. He puts a fun kind of lighthearted twist into the voices, and it just makes it really a good time to read. He also did the newest the Collapsing Empire series that John Scalzi wrote. He did all the audiobooks for those as well. So yeah, that'd be my person.
We are taking pre-orders for Ready Player 2. So that's my shameless plug for the interview.
Oh, cool.
But so would you want him to play the character as well, or do you have somebody else in mind if it was ever to become, say, a movie or a TV series?
Oh, so maybe I misunderstood you. I thought you were asking about audiobooks only.
Yeah, no, the audiobooks first. Yeah, who would be a good personal voice for the audiobooks? I mean, some people, I've even asked, would you rather do the audiobook yourself because you have the characters' voice already in your head, or we know Elena does her own voices for her audiobooks for the different characters, but how you want it to read. But yeah, that was the first question. What celebrity would you want to read your book if you weren't to read it yourself? Now, if it was ever to make it to the big screen or the small screen, would you want Will Wheaton to play one of your characters, or did you have somebody else in mind?
I'll have to table that question, because I've obviously thought about it like little pipe dreams, like, oh, my book will someday be a movie. But no, I don't really have anybody super identified as different characters, especially because in my series, it spans a long distance time. So I have it start let's take The Dragon and the Whites. It starts when Liam is a senior in high school, and then it skips like 10 years, and then there's a bunch of stuff that happens when he's in like his, let's call it late 20s, early 30s. So I would almost need two separate characters. I need like the teenage character, and then I need the younger adult character. So yeah, I'll save that for the next interview. I'll think about it in the background. But no, I could totally picture some people doing like an awesome job at different things, because I love action movies. I love any kind of like Michael Bay movies, watching stuff just blow up, and there's a lot of that in my books. So yeah, incendiary dragon fire is pretty prevalent in my things. So yeah, we got to have a lot of like awesome people watching things burn in the background and walking away from it, not looking back.
Who were some of your biggest influences for the books? What any particular authors that influenced you to write or in your story?
So probably Tolkien is one of my biggest favorites, because I love fantasy that's set in a very natural feeling world. Reading The Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, The Silmarillion, they're all in the woods, they're in the mountains, they're in very natural areas, elf-like areas. And that really inspires me to then tell my story in a similar manner. I didn't want mine taking place in these, big castles and, fantastical lands. I wanted mine to be more of a humble story, kind of like the everyday man's dragon killing story adventure. Yeah, that was probably my influence there. The Lord of the Rings was really big with me. But yeah, there's tons of awesome fantasy authors out there that I wish I could write like, and maybe they'll have their styles creep out in the future books. But we'll have to see.
Who are you listening to? What book are you listening to now?
Right now, I'm listening to Christopher Paolini's newest book, To Sleep in a Sea of Stars, which is crazy long. Like your average audiobook is usually 8 to 12 hours. This one I think is 32 hours long. So I've been listening to it for a while now, and I'm almost like 9 hours in. But I love it. So I mean, I can't complain. It's a great story. But, sometimes you have a book where you're reading it because you feel compelled to read it, but you're excited about reading the next one and you kind of want to just get through it so you can go read the other one. I can't start and stop things. I have to just plow through and finish it. So, but no, this is not the case. I'm loving every aspect of the story. It's just a really thick book. But I mean, he spent like 15 years on it or something. Like, I don't remember when the last Aragon book came out, but he wrote the Aragon series when he was in high school, and now he's like 32 or something like that. So yeah, he had time to make a big thick book.
Yeah, and those Aragon books are thick books in and of themselves. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this new one here. It's on our list, our to buy list for the store. Hopefully we'll have it soon. But of course, you can always, everybody out there, you can always order it from us. So we're up to.
I highly recommend anybody that likes space-based sci-fi to call you, Chris, and pick up a copy of the book.
Nope.
It's really good so far. I like it.
Well, we got a
It's
few.
not a dragon story. It's not Aragon. It's he went off in a completely different direction.
Did he?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, we got a couple minutes left, so I'm just going to go ahead and say thank you to everybody who came, both on Facebook Live. Alana, thank you for coming here and joining us on Zoom and your questions. Thank you, Tim, for joining us and telling us all about your books and your writing. Tim's
thanks for having me.
The Dragon books are available at the store. I'll get back to you very soon about the other one. We don't have that one quite yet, but feel free, anybody, to message me, and I'll definitely get you a copy of the Eggs in Two Baskets and signed copies.
Yeah.
And
we got Medusa's out.
Yep. Yeah.
She had her injections and now she's here to say hi. It's Reptile Awareness Day. So I did not make that up.
I was just handed this. Here's my little dragon display for everybody. Yep. Which one's that? Shivnath?
Yes. Shivnath. And we got Orion. The whole team is here.
All right. Well, again, thank you everybody for joining us, and again, Tim's books are available, signed copies both available through our website, freethinkerscorner.com. You can order them that way. You can pick them up. We can ship them to you, or please come into the store. We do appointments or walk-ins. And thanks again, Tim, and we hope to see you again soon in person. Hopefully this will all blow over soon.
Yeah, me too. I love the town. When I came up that one time, Dover, New Hampshire is a great place, and you got an awesome little store there. So especially, I don't think you had the art aspect of it when I was there last. So I'm interested to see the way it looks now.
Yeah, we still don't have the art aspect yet because just as we got it started, we had to close it all down, and we just haven't had the means to get it up and going. But we're hoping soon. We're starting to move as far as getting that going again. So that's the gallery at a Freethinkers Corner. Hopefully we'll have that up and running too. So.
All right, cool.
All right. Well, thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.